It's not good news. The Israeli military is currently striking the Gaza Strip. They say Hamas violated the ceasefire agreement.
All right, folks, so unfortunately we have some truly tragic breaking news, which is being reported on by outlets ranging from Fox News to Al Jazeera. And the news is this. The Trump-brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas appears at this time to be truly shattered, with each side accusing the other of violating the ceasefire and the Israeli Defense Force launching an attack in the Gaza Strip. Now, in addition to the obvious humanitarian and foreign policy disaster and crisis that this likely reignites, there's also a domestic politics angle too, which we need to talk about, which it appears that Donald Trump and his highest profile MAGA supporters and cheerleaders in and out of office, including Piers Morgan, are now publicly humiliated because for days they have insisted that Trump brokered a ceasefire that would be permanent and basically a peace deal, and everyone, liberals, Democrats, progressives, leftists, everyone should get on their knees and effectively prostrate themselves before Trump, give him all the credit that they think that he was owed for achieving peace in the Middle East, and anyone who was skeptical or hesitated should be castigated. And now it appears the skepticism was merited, and they have egg on their face. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, so let's take a look. We got some things to look at here. We're going to look at the reporting surrounding the ceasefire, likely ceasefire violation, and then we'll get into, again, Piers Morgan in particular, and I'll explain why I'm picking on him specifically. So Fox reported this earlier today, ceasefire threatened. Israel says Hamas carried out multiple attacks on troops in a bold violation of the truce agreement. The Israeli military then responded with strikes on Gaza. Piers Morgan said, for fuck's sake, FFS didn't even last a week. Midas Touch, the biggest liberal commentary channel on YouTube, says just in, Israeli officials halt the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza Strip and ramp up military strikes after accusing Hamas of violating the ceasefire. Israeli officials are pushing for military operations to resume, quote, in full force. Tommy Vitor, who's the foreign policy co-host on Pod Save America, says this: as the new and improved Barry Weiss-led CBS runs this puff piece on Kushner and Witkoff, Jared Kushner being Trump's son-in-law and Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, being his special envoy to the Middle East, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, all but declares the Gaza ceasefire deal is dead. And this is what they posted, the Israeli Defense Forces. In response to the blatant violation of the ceasefire agreement earlier today, the IDF has begun a series of strikes against Hamas terror targets in southern Gaza. Now, let's look at some of the reporting we heard from Fox News. Let's take a look at Al Jazeera. Israeli strikes kill 15 in Gaza as both sides say the other breached the truce. Hamas maintains it is abiding by the ceasefire as 15 Palestinians are killed by Israeli attacks across Gaza on Sunday. Israel's military has launched a wave of airstrikes on southern Gaza as the fragile United States brokered ceasefire intended to end the two-year war comes under threat. The Israeli army said on Sunday that it is conducting a massive and extensive wave of strikes on dozens of targets just hours after it struck the city of Rafah, claiming its troops had come under fire from Hamas fighters in the area. An Israeli security official also told news agencies that the transfer of humanitarian aid into Gaza would be halted, quote, until further notice after the alleged Hamas ceasefire violation. Gaza's civil defense agency said a number of Israeli air raids have killed at least 15 Palestinians since the morning across the war-devastated enclave. The Israeli army said it responded with strikes and artillery fire after its troops were targeted by Hamas. However, Hamas's armed wing said it is adhering to the ceasefire agreement. Quote, we have no knowledge of any incidents or clashes taking place in the Rafah area, as these are red zones under the occupation's control, and contact with the remaining groups of ours there have been cut off since the war resumed in March of this year, said the Qassam Brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, said in a statement on Sunday. Reporting from Gaza City, Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud said Palestinians, quote, are very concerned about the sudden escalation. Quote, fear and panic are dominating the scene among the people in Gaza as Israel's military launched more than 20 airstrikes. We've been approached by people, including women and children, who are asking us if the war is back on, Mahmoud said. Quote, some said, now that Israel's got the captives back, they're back at killing us. That's the kind of sentiment that we're hearing, end quote. Israeli strikes in the south came as medical sources at Gaza's Al-Qaza Hospital, I probably butchered that, told Al Jazeera that 5 Palestinians had been killed and an unspecified number wounded in an Israeli attack in central Gaza. And it goes on and on like this. Again, each side, as we discussed in a previous video, accusing the other of violating the ceasefire going back several days. Now, that brings us back to Piers Morgan and the domestic politics. Again, obviously, the humanitarian and foreign policy disaster that this likely reignites is a major problem, and who knows where it will be in a day or in a week, okay? But here's the domestic issue, or one of the domestic issues. In addition to Trump being humiliated and MAGA being humiliated about this, again, I want to focus on Piers Morgan, because Piers Morgan claims to be a nonpartisan journalist with no particular bias, so he sets himself kind of above the partisan fray. But that's not how he acts with Trump, and that's kind of my ongoing bugbear with him. So I'm going to show you some statements made by Piers Morgan from the past week or so, more than a week, about the ceasefire. So when Trump announced that there was a ceasefire, Piers Morgan said this huge moment for the Middle East, for the world, and for President @real Donald Trump. As his haters keep howling that he's the new Hitler, he is delivering peace like he promised and deserves enormous credit for doing so. That was on October 9th. He went on to say in a different post, and this was on the 13th, so 4 days later, the peacemaker, President @real Donald Trump, punches the air in delight as he arrives in Tel Aviv to seal peace in the Israel-Hamas war. Piers Morgan on October 13th said, still no post from Senator Bernie Sanders about the historic peace deal in the Middle East, but he has found time to post his 17th anti-Trump sentiment in the past week. And again, in response to the news earlier today, Piers Morgan said, for fuck's sake, didn't even last week. Now, a couple of things I want to point out here, actually, because there's another clip as well, or another quote as well. When Piers was confronted about this on Twitter, he said this, if I can find the tweet real quick. Okay. He says, he got the hostages released. That alone was a great achievement. And listen, I agree. Donald Trump arranged for the release of hostages. He does deserve credit for that. But that's not what Piers Morgan was demanding before. We read the quotes. It wasn't, thank you for arranging for the release of the remaining hostages. You said it was a ceasefire. You indicated it was a permanent ceasefire. You indicated that it was peace, 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 a peace deal. And you castigated other people for not giving it the credit you felt it was deserved. Well, as Biden apologist, I will say, and somebody who liked President Biden's domestic policy, had criticisms of his foreign policy, Chris Jackson is the biggest Biden fanboy you'll ever find. And as he pointed out, if you look at the number of hostages released by President, Donald Trump arranged for the release of 28, and Biden arranged for the release of 140. So if that's what Piers is talking about, the release of Israeli hostages, then by his own logic, his own moving of the goalposts, Joe Biden was orders of magnitude more effective and successful than his friend Donald Trump. And I'm sure he wouldn't agree to that. I'm sure Piers Morgan would quibble with that. Now, I'm going to read you some reactions to this again. So as I pointed out on Twitter, for more than a week, Piers prematurely but relentlessly overhyped the ceasefire as a peace deal Trump sealed and castigated anyone who disagreed. Skeptics recalled that Trump and Biden brokered a ceasefire earlier this year, which collapsed, and wisely refrained from overstating. Again, we're going to read some other reactions, but I want to focus on what I said for just a second. You may recall that is what I said. When we did videos about this or touched on the subject, I said I was happy to give Trump credit for even a temporary ceasefire. I was happy to give Trump credit for arranging for the release of the remaining hostages. And again, a temporary ceasefire not only protects the Israelis, but it ended, at least temporarily, a genocide in Gaza. So I was happy to give him credit for that. What I was not prepared to do, and I said this, I am not prepared to give Trump credit in advance for shit that has not occurred. I'm not going to take it on faith. I'm not going to assume that a ceasefire is permanent, and that a permanent ceasefire is a peace deal, and that a peace deal between two countries is peace in the Middle East. Trump and Piers Morgan and all of MAGA sycophants wanted us to take the ceasefire and jump all the way ahead. Trump got a ceasefire, ergo, it's almost like saying, hey, this guy started to pour concrete in for a foundation, so I want you to pay him for the entire house. Don't even wait for it to get done. Just assume the house is going to be built, and it's going to be the best friggin' house ever, and nobody could build a house like this. It's like, no, asshole, we're going to monitor this, And as things move along, then we're prepared to give credit as time went on. It's not that I thought, and I said repeatedly, it's not that I thought that that there was no multiverse or timeline in the multiverse where Trump couldn't succeed. But until that happened, he did nothing to deserve the benefit of the doubt on this. That's insane. I wouldn't have done it for Biden. Why the hell would I do it for Trump? Again, Trump and Biden both, while Biden was leaving office, brokered a ceasefire that was shattered on Trump's watch. And the attacks resumed. The genocide resumed for months. Why would I give Trump credit here? So let's take a look at some other people. Again, whole host of people from progressives to centrists. Mehdi Hassan, friend of the show. All week, the pro-Israel and pro-Trump supporters screamed at us in unison, "Why aren't you celebrating the ceasefire?" Because we knew it wouldn't last. But even I didn't think it would be over in less than a week. What a complete and utter humiliation for Trump, thanks to Netanyahu. Matt Iglesias, who is much more of a moderate and a centrist than Mehdi, says, even he's calling this out. The terms of this agreement were transparently unworkable, but I'm very glad the hostages are home. But I think the Nobel Peace Prize might have been a little premature. Tommy Vitor retweeted this from Daniel De Petris. The notion that we were on the cusp of a new Middle East was always blather. Trump deserves credit for getting all the hostages released, but it's TBD whether peace will actually be established. A pause in the fighting is just that, a pause. The hard issues are getting kicked down the road. Destiny, one of the biggest liberal commentators out there, who has repeatedly sparred with Piers Morgan on this, he responded to Piers going, who could have guessed this? And he was right to call this out because he was skeptical. When he was on Piers Morgan's show just last week, he was talked about this, like, I'm not prepared to give Trump credit for shit that hasn't happened, nor should he have. So Destiny was just 100% right. Destiny's position isn't that it's guaranteed that this will collapse. It's just that in the balance of probability, it likely will. And I'm not prepared to say Trump has defied probability and succeeded when we don't have evidence that he did. And then Ron Felikowski, we're going to close with him, the editor-in-chief of Midas Touch, says, we always get these huge Trump announcements with much media hype and fanfare, with lots of big promises and assurances, effusively praising himself, looking for awards and prizes, while experts say the details are scarce or non-existent. Then a short time later, we get the reality. So, folks, that's just what I want to say on this. I know we stick mostly to domestic politics, and while acknowledging, again, the humanitarian disaster that this is likely to reignite, I really want to focus on this. When it comes to evaluating any leader, but I would argue particularly Trump, given that he fails much more often than he succeeds, and he lies about his failures much more often than any other, I'm not saying that liberals, progressives, and Democrats shouldn't give credit where it's due, but two things. Number one, anyone who says you need to give Trump credit, you need to ask them and ask yourself, what are they asking you to give him credit for? Is it fair? Is it actually for something that he did? That's one thing. The other thing is, you should always ask them too, did you give credit to Joe Biden or Barack Obama for the shit that they did? Show me proof that you gave them credit. Piers, where did you give credit to President Biden for the things that he accomplished that Trump didn't? Like, for example, the infrastructure law. Trump tried to get it passed. We're going to have massive infrastructure. Trump failed 4 years. Biden got it done. When did you give him credit for that? When did you give him Obama credit for things? Show me. You're demanding that liberals have to give credit to Trump. Show me where this goes both ways. Number one. Number two, don't expect me to give credit to anybody, but especially Trump, for shit that has not happened. We are not obligated to because of stuff like this. Could the ceasefire be back on track in a week? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not saying that Trump has permanently failed and that he will never succeed, but I'm saying that this is objective proof that what they promised us and what they demanded of us was absolutely baseless. So with that in mind, let me know what you think in the comments.